10 reasons that nobody wants to battle with NATO. As World War II ended and the relationship between the Soviet Union and other Allied forces deteriorated, the United States, Canada, and a group of 10 European countries positioned themselves for a new geopolitical reality. In 1949, they founded the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, an alliance with the objective of defending a free, interconnected, and democratic Europe, notably against the Soviet Union. In international relations, an alliance is a collection of countries that band together to pursue their common security interests. In many circumstances, alliances offer military help if one member is endangered, a formal commitment known as mutual security. The basis of NATO's strength stems from Article 5 of its founding treaty, a vow that an attack on one member country will be considered an attack on the entire alliance. All kinds of countries profit from alliances. For smaller, weaker countries that lack resources to build a strong defense, joining an alliance can be the only practical path to sustaining the security and repelling prospective rivals. Larger or stronger countries use alliances to bolster their military might, and sometimes their influence over smaller countries, while also limiting nuclear proliferation among smaller countries. The power of NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is regarded around the globe as the world's biggest and most powerful alliance. But where does NATO's power come from? Does the organization have its own military forces or NATO troops? Simply put, no and yes. The alliance draws on the military force of its 30 allied and partner states to assist missions and operations around the world. The military might of NATO has grown collectively since 1949. A deputy Sacer manages troop contributions. Multinational forces return to their respective nations after an operation or assignment is completed. When the North Atlantic Council, NAC, chooses to conduct an operation, mission, or exercise, NATO's military authorities submit a drawn concept of operations, referred to as CONOPS, which outlines the minimal level of troops they are requesting in terms of resources, labor, and equipment. Force generation is the term for this procedure. It is usual practice for the force generation process to involve the force generation branch, national military representatives, and Allied Command Operations (NMRs). Each ally is responsible for allocating the troops and resources required to carry out operations and missions that have been approved by the NAC. The ultimate determining element in whether or not a nation will contribute is the availability of funding. The expenses of running NATO and carrying out its objectives and activities are covered by both direct and indirect contributions from member nations. The Allies' participation in NATO-led operations accounts for a significant portion of these indirect contributions. Every time a member nation offers its armed troops in a NATO operation, the associated expenditures are covered. For instance, the country that makes a fighter plane available bears the cost of delivering it. Direct contributions are made to NATO's shared budgets by allies in accordance with an established cost-sharing mechanism based on relative gross national income. These contributions cover the costs of the airborne warning and control systems and other integrated structures and equipment held by NATO as a whole, a WACS. According to a recent report, there are over 20,000 NATO military personnel managing land, air, and naval operations in a variety of circumstances, which are frequently difficult. Among other places, NATO is in charge of operations in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Iraq, and the Mediterranean, by transporting medical personnel and essential supplies, assisting in the construction of field hospitals to house COVID-affected patients, and offering support to local authorities where NATO troops are stationed. The alliance is also ensuring a strong and cohesive fight against the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. In times of national and international crisis and disaster, NATO is always first in line. This is the fourth installment in the Knowing NATO series from Shape Public Affairs. The highlights that follow will explain NATO-owned assets and the specifics of NATO exercises. Why nobody wants to engage in combat with NATO. 1. A group's defense. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a union of 30 nations from Europe and North America, was established in 1949 with the purpose of defending the citizens and national borders of its members. In accordance with the collective defense principle, which states that if one NATO ally is attacked, all NATO allies are also attacked, an alliance is formed. As an illustration, all NATO allies stood behind America after the 9/11 terrorist attacks as if they too had been assaulted. 2. Individual allies commit soldiers and equipment to be placed under a single NATO command whenever NATO conducts a mission. They are referred to as NATO forces. NATO's fleet of WCS, Airborne Warning and Control, surveillance aircraft is its sole collection of military hardware. A capability for global Hawk surveillance drones is also being developed by NATO. 3. NATO's command structure. With so many nations cooperating, it is crucial to have a clear chain of command. Within NATO's command structure, military and civilian employees from all member states collaborate daily. This contains two of the highest-ranking strategic commands: Allied Command Transformation, situated in Norfolk, United States, and Allied Command Operations, based in Mons, Belgium. 4. The NATO command structure is being updated to stay functional, so that we can move forces across Europe more swiftly and maintain clear and open naval lines of communication across the Atlantic. Defense budget. NATO allies vow to avoid budget cuts, increase defense expenditure to 2% of GDP by 2024, and devote 20% of that amount to significant equipment during the Wales Summit in 2014. We are moving forward. European allies and Canada have increased their defense spending by over $46 billion over the last 3 years. 5. NATO's founding principle, the open door policy, states that any nation in the Euro-Atlantic region is free to join the alliance if it is willing to fulfill the requirements and obligations of membership, contributes to its security, and upholds NATO's values of democracy, reform, and the rule of law. The number of nations in NATO has increased from 12 to 30 since 1949. North Macedonia became the 30th nation to join the NATO alliance in 2020. 6. Cyber defense. As cyber attacks become more frequent, sophisticated, and damaging, NATO has made this a key priority. Actually, NATO officially acknowledges cyberspace as an operational domain, much like land, sea, or air. By exchanging information on threats, funding education and training, and conducting exercises, NATO assists allies in strengthening their cyber defenses. Additionally, NATO has cyber defense specialists that can be dispatched to assist allies under assault. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has implemented the largest expansion of its collective defense. For instance, we've already sent 4 multinational battle groups to Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They want to avert conflict rather than start one. 7. Managing global crises. Sometimes promoting security in our neighborhood and safeguarding our citizens at home necessitates taking action abroad. NATO prevented additional carnage in Bosnia and Kosovo in the 1990s. NATO has contributed to making sure that Afghanistan is no longer a refuge for global terrorist organizations since 2003. Along with addressing the refugee and migrant crisis in Europe since 2016, NATO has also assisted in preventing piracy off the Horn of Africa. 8. Fighting terrorism. NATO contributes more than 13,000 NATO soldiers to Afghanistan to train local forces, playing a significant role in the fight against terrorism. The global coalition to defeat ISIS counts NATO as a full member, and our WCS surveillance planes continue to assist the coalition. Our new intelligence division aids us in foreseeing and addressing threats, and NATO is also educating Iraqi security forces so they can better combat ISIS. To assist allies in combating the threat of terrorism, NATO has established a hub for the South in Naples. 9. NATO doesn't have its own armed forces, but it has a permanent integrated military command structure, comprising both military and civilian staff from all member states. These staff work jointly to attain the same objectives. Along with addressing the refugee and migrant crisis in Europe since 2016, NATO has also assisted in preventing piracy off the Horn of Africa. NATO benefits from being able to rely on the military capabilities and experience of each member nation, even though we may not have a military. Each nation contributes people, tanks, submarines, and even fighter jets to the table. 10. Currently, it has the capacity to rely on close to 3.5 million personnel, military and civilian, all at once. Each member state accepts that their contributions will have varying strategic weights and sway. All NATO operations and missions are carried out by Allied Command Operations, ACO, which is overseen by Supreme Allied Commander Europe, SACER. Despite the alliance's shared goal of keeping the Soviet Union in check during the Cold War, members today don't always see their national interests as compatible with those of their allies. This precariousness was made abundantly clear in late 2019 when NATO members Turkey and the United States, who were on opposing sides in the Syrian civil war, came dangerously close to attacking one another. Despite the fact that the alliance continues to enjoy strong public support in its member states, certain NATO leaders have been open about potential problems. In 2019, French President Emmanuel Macron issued a warning that conflicts among NATO's members carried the risk of becoming the organization brain dead. Additionally, American President Donald J. Trump has repeatedly threatened to leave NATO if European nations do not commit to raising their defense budget. These conflicts, which are still not entirely free of dangers, indicate a tumultuous future for NATO in a Europe that is far from threat-free.